They hear what?
There's Zohar, 45 people when Shimon Yochai was giving his Joshua on the day he died.
Yeah.
Somewhere there was something that was happening outside, and 45 people were nifta.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's been going on.
Someone said that it's like was 45 points.
Yeah, it was going, whatever. But
It was very people died.
And also, if you think about it,
But the
33 was the fourth
thing-
week in 5 days.
no, that's
It's been missing. You're saying,
pure missing,
33,
and
4
nothing's
weeks and
happened
5 days.
until
are
now.
over.
What?
Yeah, it's pure missing.
Yes, I know. I've been there a couple of times for that going on. It's unbelievable.
In Mecca, apparently, there's.
Tunnel. They're going
to tunnel.
Well, that's a
Shirt's not here.
Israel is very forward in a lot of things, but health and safety is not one.
Well, they can't fight the people there. They have chazak fears over there.
No, you're right.
They tried.
Even so, like, you go anywhere in Israel, there's no health and
Next
safety.
year it won't be the same.
Park, you go to a park and like,
Next year, we'll
it's
be
boring.
We'll probably have to book online to get it.
I'll get a barber in the States.
They're gonna do whatever happens. They'll do it.
He's got it, does it online. He's got like this look.
If you call him, he'll.
When did a Chinese barber next time?
How's it doing, Tuesday?
They got too much money. Too
Half.
much.
They're supposed to get to two.
You heard it? You say
Bolton Jewish is coming up, isn't it? Bolton Jewish is coming up. If you don't guarantee you will not get harassed. Bolton Jewish will have been harassed with Jewish. And 9 o'clock this morning, I had 23 messages.
You're popular. It's because you give them around.
You're right.
Because you give. You're a giver. Be happy.
How much is your page?
My page.
My page is doing very well. My page
Your
is doing
page
very
is
well.
doing well.
Yeah, he's on.
It's just family thing.
You heard it? It's got a page.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a page for this one anyway. You can.
Sounds like I got a pay. You can get that.
Try that.
Send them money.
Yeah, I've done that as well. You've got my page a lot.
Yeah, great.
I think we're second.
What's on 36 you got? No, your target, I mean, is 36.
£36.
Grand.
Oh, phew, I thought $36.
It's a few cameras, all
All will be revealed. All will be revealed.
What colour balloons
Are you involved with this?
How much it doubled?
I've got-
So you're really
I have
getting
a page,
18.
but I'm not-
On the bridge.
Is it true? You don't make it for yourself?
Okay. We're up to Chof Aleph from the Aleph, third line from the top. We learned that before Kriyas Hagever, the entire Azor of Klal Yisrael was literally mobbed, packed. And the Gemara brought Machlekas Rav and Rav Shela to what does the word Kriyas Hagever mean? Rav said Kriyas Hagever means
a person.
person. There goes. Gvini, he was called. The person who would shout very loud. How far could he be heard? 3,000. 12 mil. Rav Shela says it's a chicken, a rooster or a hen. The Gemara now brings a brisa to support Rav Shela. Tanya Kvosta Rav Shela. Hayotz lederech kodem Kriyas Hagever, a person who leaves his home before Kriyas Hagever. Domoi beroisho, his own life is on his head, meaning that it's his own responsibility. One should not travel in the night. Rashi Psochim says because there are more bandits and more pitfalls at night. So V'yesh Omer at Sheyishne, you should wait for the rooster to crow a second time. V'yesh Omer at Sheyishalish until a third time. It's an argument, do you need to hit a chicken once, twice, or 3 times? Which kind of chicken did we say? But it seems that certain chickens would be early, some would be late. It's a medium chicken. But one thing is very clear from this price, so that Kriyas Gever means it's called of a chicken. So we've got Baisa like Rab and Baisa like Rav Shela. Now that we mentioned the crowd in the Beis HaMikdash, we're going to go on to a list of different Nissim in the Beis HaMikdash. Omar Yud Omar Rab, V'shor she'yisrael early in the regel. When Klal Yisrael would come up to the Beis HaMikdash, Umdim Tzfufin, they would stand cramped, squashy. The word Tzfufin, Rashi says, comes from the word Tzof. What does the word Tzof mean? To? No. Oh, you're right, actually. It can mean to look, not here. Tzof means to float. Sof means to float. Sof up in our minds, it's float. That it was so clouded that people's legs didn't touch the floor. So people felt like they were floating along the clouds. When they would bow down, they would have space. Why would they have space when they bow down? Because what people would say vidu, they would do it in the position of being bowed down. And it's not nice that other people should hear your own aveils. So there would be a 4 amma space in every direction between every person bowing down. But in Shochin, there's one more picture. In Shochin, and they would get drawn 11 ammas behind Beis HaKaporos. Just one very brief thing. Klal Yisrael were only allowed in the Ezra Sisor, which was how big, does anybody know? 135 by 11. It's very, very small. 135 by 11. Here, a narrow corridor. Can you see over here? It's colored white, plain white. This is the corridor. Now, this Beis says that they would get so many, they would come behind over here. Can you see behind the kaporos? That's over here. Now, the word says like this. Ma'ika Omar, what does that mean? You just said that lots of space. Hachika Omar, this is what it means. It means like this. Even though when they stood, they were so cramped that they would be floating and they would be packed that they couldn't fit in Ezra Sisol, and without choice, they would end up going all the way around to here, and here, all became full of Yidden. That means all of this and this whole area. Rashi's mashma that not to the side of the Mizbeach, and it's only around the Mizbeach, but not between the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash. Even though they would be so squashed, when they would bow down with space. Again, let's get this clear. When they would stand, they would cover the entire Azor. So much so, not just the 11 Amos, but it doesn't have a picture of this. That means when they would stand, not only would they be so packed, they would take up this whole area, the Ezra Sisol, plus the Ezra's Koyanim, plus all the area around the Beis HaMikdash would be full of people standing. When they would bow down, says Rashi, they would only bow down over here. They won't bow down in the rest of the area. Because you always want to be bowing towards the Beis HaMikdash. If you're standing here, you're behind the Beis HaMikdash, you're not bowing to the entrance. So they would all move to over here, which was only like a 10th or 20th of the original area. And they would have space of 4 amas between each person bowing down. Now that asks a question, a fascinating question. Maal says, if somebody would be standing with a tape measure outside the Beis HaMikdash, would he see the Beis HaMikdash bigger or the same size? Pashtus would see the same size. If you're standing inside, would the area actually expand? How did it work? It tries to work out because different mahalachim work. No, but could you actually measure on the ground more space? And one more thing, this is Derech HaChaim says, very nice pshat. It says, when a person stands by his own position and refuses to budge, tzfufin, everybody's got squashy. I've got no space for you, you've got no space for me. Mishtach, the person bows, the person is more relinquishes is more humble. Suddenly you find space. Sometimes you have on a Shabbos table a huge amount of space, and 3 children on one side, and they say there's no space, it's too close to me, and some one person stumps off the table to eat another room out of irritation, that there's not enough space. When a person wants to feel there's no space, can be owned in, standing, swapping, and squash. Or mishtachne, but when you're a bit more thing, suddenly you find that you got loads of space. The Maisa. This is one of the 10 nisim that happened in Beis HaMikdash. This is a Mishnah of us. I saw this in Beis HaMikdash. There were 10 miracles in Beis HaMikdash. What happened was, if a woman is expecting and she feels an urge to eat meat, it's important to give it to her, otherwise she'll miscarry. And it never happened that she would smell the roasted meat of the Kodshim and say, "Oh, I want a piece." It never happened. Rashi's got an interesting mamokim. He brings one of the Rishonim that had it happened, the Rishon says we would not have given her from the meat because it was zilzal kodesh. And Rashi asks the question, but the fact is, Pekach nefesh is deicha kol ha'torah kula. He says it's interesting over here. It's mashma that they want to. I say never happened. Never happened. The meat never went bad. You must remember it was huge amounts of meat, and sometimes it could be a very, very hot day, middle of Tammuz and Ov, and there was no fridge or freezers. And the meat could be for 2 days at least for the shlamim, and the parts like on Mizbeach could be even longer than 2 days, and yet nothing ever went bad. There was never a fly in the kitchen. I mean, even though there was flies are attracted to blood and to meat, their carcasses, there was no flies going to Beis Mikdash. And Kohen Gadol in Kippur never became tummy through Keri. Oh, very good. Ashur asks the question. That's one answer Ashur gives. What's the second answer Ashur gives? Difference between Beis Rishon and Beis Sheni, that perhaps all these nisim only happen to Beis Rishon and this is in Beis Sheni. But the Meiri points out that the Maisa Tishon also says, if you look very carefully, side of the page, that the Maisa, the Kohanim Gedolim did become tummy, just not through Keri. That means it became tummy through other things. Keri is a particularly lowly tumor. For example, if it come tummy through a sheretz or a dead person, that wasn't the same disgrace, so to speak. But Keri never happened. In Briggs, actually, we had it in a few places that sometimes somebody became possible and had to get another Kohen Gadol. So it is possible. Then the Tishon says perhaps all the cases where somebody became tummy was Beis Sheni, and this Gemara is again referring to Beis Rishon. So it answers the other question as well regarding why we needed to make so much effort, and also regarding the fact that Gemara does say became tummy. Either they became tummy with other things not Keri, or they became tummy through, or it was only Beis Rishon or Beis Sheni. The Shmuel in Ovis is an ancient thing. The Shmuel says that if with all the efforts they did, that the Kohen Gadol should not become tummy, what's the great chiddush that they did not become tummy? Obviously, if you try very hard, it's not impossible. And he says, because the Yetzer Hara, he says, when you're about to beat somebody, let's see how we're going to fight, he realizes this is his last chance, he pulls himself together and does everything he can to overcome the enemy. So the Yetzer Hara on Yom Kippur does everything he can to uproot from Kaisel the Kedusha.
Do we not see the Yetzer Hara as even like a malach?
On Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, this is. Okay. And Maisa, he says therefore a person should be aware that there are certain times of the year when there's more Kedusha and the Yetzer Hara, so to speak, galvanizes itself. And he also writes that before Mashiach comes, it will be the same thing. And what will happen is the Yetzer Hara, he says very interesting, it's quite Kabbalistic, which guys share brings this, that there were 3 times the Yetzer Hara was not almost completely overcome. The ultimate Rishon, the Yetzer Hara won by Matan Torah, but the 3rd time will be before Mashiach days. But we're guaranteed that the 3rd time will succeed. Because even though the first 2 we failed, so to speak, the 3rd time we're guaranteed. But because of that guarantee, the Yetzer Hara will do its best, so to speak. Okay. So in the contrary, sometimes you see, sometimes a big Yetzer Hara gets scared. The answer is, on the contrary, the greatness of the Yetzer Hara shows the potential for Kedusha. The Yoma, which was brought on the 2nd day of Pesach, the Shalechem on Shavuos, every Shabbos, never became possible. Rashi explains that these particular korbanos, it was very important that they should not become possible. Anybody want to say why? Why these korbanos should not become possible? What do we care?
The Kohen Gadol has
Not much of a
share.
No, you're going on in the direction because these, if they were to become possible, you'd be in a stuck. For example, the lechem aponim, it's baked on Friday and it's put on the mitzvah on Shabbos. If on Shabbos it became possible, what are you going to do? You're stuck, completely stuck. The Yoma, they would harvest it, and then it was the first harvest, and they would bring it to Beis Hamikdash and winnow it and sieve it. And the same thing on Shavuos, the Shtei Lechem. If it went wrong, you had nothing else to replace it. It wasn't like a chatos on oil, if you shechted it, it's with another animal. You always had a spare animal. These were situations where if it went wrong, you were completely stuck. They stand crowded, and we spoke about this, and bowed down and spaced. And never did a snake or scorpion hurt anybody in Yerushalayim, even though Meiri says they were commonly found in Yerushalayim, they never harmed. That it's uncomfortable for me to sleep in Yerushalayim. And I've seen the Svarim brought down, it's a very interesting thing to think about. To go, what's the most posh hotel in Manchester in England? Do you know?
Fulda's Hotel.
Fulda's Hotel. What? Deansgate. If you were to go there today, I'm ready to wager that you'll find somebody complaining about his accommodations. You always find people complaining about accommodations. And all the years of Yerushalayim, millions of people crowded in, and nobody ever said the accommodation is uncomfortable and it's unpleasant for me to sleep in Yerushalayim. Okay. Says more Pasach B'Mikdash V'Sim B'Yushalayim. We started off talking about 10 days in the Mikdash. We finished off Yerushalayim. Answers Gemara. The last two, which indeed was Yerushalayim, you have to replace, and you have to replace them with another two. Ikatati Achodais B'Mikdash. There were two others. B'Mikdash Tanya. Never did the rain put out the fire of the Beis Hamikdash. The smoke. Two extra miracles. The fire was never put out by rain, and the pillar of smoke was never pushed away. It always went up like a pillar, and it didn't get dispersed by the winds. More of Suleka is no others. The halacha is that an earthenware keli you cannot do hagolah to it. So if you cooked an earthenware, which in old days was very common because they didn't have stainless steel, so they used to use silver, gold, copper, or earthenware. Silver, gold, and copper were relatively hard to get, so earthenware was quite a common one. Now earthenware. Nowadays we have a lot of different metals which were scientifically created, and therefore we don't use earthenware. But earthenware, the problem with it is you can't do a hagolah. So if you ever cooked with it a chatos or osham or shnamim, or any korban, you could never use it again, because the meat inside it would be balua, and after a day or two it would become noisa. So it became possible. Can you imagine? So every single time you'd have to smash it. So what would happen? Can you imagine the millions upon millions of special mess happened? It would get swallowed up in the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. Not only that got swallowed, whenever you bring a common olah, you will take away the zefek and the noitza. Noitza is like the stomach or the feather, and the korban is there's a word for it in English, the gazet. You would take it and you'd throw it from the mizbeach, and you would land next to the rab. The dish mizbeach and the cleaning out of the inside mizbeach, it will all get swallowed up in its place. So we see over here, there were many other miracles. We said 10, we've got more than 10. Answers the Gemara, Psule, the thing that the Yoma, the Shtei Lechem, and the Lechem upon it, that all three never became possible, we counted it as three, but really it's only one, because it's all the same idea. Tilosahava, you said there were three, Chashvidu Bechad is only one. Apik trait, so now if you take three, make it into one, you're minusing two. But Ayel trait, I've added another two, so the other two is that the earthenware got swallowed up, and so did the cleaning of the Mizrach HaPnimi and the menorah and the inside of the stomach of the bird. Anybody know why the stomach of the bird did not go on the Mizrach? Why is it? Because a bird doesn't eat by its owner. It's not like a sheep where it's stuck in its place. It flies from place to place. So sometimes it nibbles a crumb from your garden, So my bird is it. So what? The Torah wants to show us the importance, so we don't want it on the Mizrach. Something to go on the Mizbeach has to be 100% kosher gold. Has to be 100% clean. So therefore the stomach did not go on. But what did go on the Mizbeach, which was very strange, the feathers, which made a very bad smell, that was to make it look big. It's very interesting to think about. Okay. So the Maisa, we've taken away three and made it into one. So now we've got two more. If you're adding the two, the things that were swallowed up, instead of counting them as two, that means the swallowing up of the earthenware vessels and the swallowing up of the and the bird's stomach. You should count it all as one, because it's all a concept of swallowing up. And if that's the case, you minus one. You're missing one. There's one more. The day they took it off the table, it was as fresh as the day they put it on the table. How many days later was that? 8 from the thing, but 9 when it was baked. And the bread was as hot and as fresh on the day they took it as the day you put it on. So they've got 10 nisim. Let's count them out very quickly according to the last cheshbon. A woman never miscarried from the smell of the meat. There was never went off the meat. There was never a fly. God never became keri. There was no psul in the Yoma upon him that's counted as one. They would stand crowded but bow spaced out. Now the next two, the snake never harming and nobody complaining, we're missing out because that never happened in Beis Hamikdash, that happened in Yerushalayim. We're adding another two, that the fire never went out and the smoke never dispersed. And then two more, a lot of things got swallowed up. That's the earthenware and the stomach and the dish mizbeach hapnimi, dish mizbeach menorah, and the menorah. And finally, the bread stayed fresh. Fading more with sulekes than more. We have this tradition from our fathers. How big was the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Anybody know? In the
10 by 10.
10 by 10 was in the Mishkan. How big was it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? 10 by 10 in the Mishkan. How much was it in the Beis HaMikdash? 20 by 20. And the Maisa, if you measured from the Oren in every direction, you would get 10. When the Oren was in the middle, very good. It shows you. Very good. Here, you measure from the Oren in this direction 10, in this direction 10. It's impossible. How is it possible? In the end of the day, the Oren itself was 2.5 amas by 1.5 amas. So there has to be less. The answer is, it didn't take up any space. There was another nest. The nest was saying more that Shlomo Melech, besides for the kruvim on the Oren, made another set of kruvim. And the pasuk there measures that each of the kruvim, the wingspan was 10 amos, meaning that the wingspan took up 20 amos. Now the problem is that only took up the measure of the wings, but how much of the kruvim themselves didn't take up any space at all? So the kruvim didn't take up any space. Answers the Gemara. Nisi de broi kechoshev. Nisi de broi kechoshev. Only miracles that happened outside, not the miracles that happened inside. Why do we count the miracles that happened inside? No, because nobody saw them. Nobody knew them. Nobody could see them. You can't see a miracle which happens inside. How are you to know that the Oren doesn't take up space? The God would see it, but since it was the public nest, so it's not counted. The Lech Maponim as well. This is Gavoihu. It's an inside nest because how would anybody know the bread was fresh? Answers the Gemara. This is the Boihu. The Omar Shlokish. My dechsiv al shulchan atoy. There was a special halacha. The table of the Beis Hamikdash had to be toy. There was a potential for it to become tummy. Top of Chafalapot base. We have a halacha that metal, even if it's immovable, can become tummy. So if you've got a metal jar, a metal box, which is huge, and you can't move it, it can become tummy. But a wooden one cannot become tummy. So, for example, those wooden cupboards, they cannot become tummy. So if a dead person was to die in this room, somebody would die in this room, those cupboards will not become tummy. Why would they become tummy? Because they can't be moved. The reason the difference between wood and metal is...
Even if the metal box is attached.
No, not if it's attached. That's not attached to the ground, those cupboards. You could actually move them if you try hard enough. It's screwed in?
I think so, it's screwed in.
I doubt it. They're not. Sure, I was moving them. No. The reason is, very briefly, because when the Torah talks about wood, it mentions in the same pasuk, creates beged or sack or bag. A bag is something which, by definition, it can be moved, immovable. It's immovable. So therefore, the wood has to be movable, metal not. Therefore, the shulchan, if it always stayed in its place and was never moved, it should become tummy. Why should it become tummy? Because it can never be moved anyway. What should you argue with me? What was the table made out of?
Gold, which is
Gold, which is wood covered in gold.
Wood underneath, no?
So here, Tosaf Rashi say very similar. Let's see the top Tosaf very quickly. Short Tosaf. It's also Nachat Rishim Mesech Zagiga Boy from the Super Zorboy. Mechab Sis Mesech Zagiga the Boss. Sipur in you go after the cover. Umeshani Shani Shulchan Dachmon Koyer 8. The Chsiv Mezbeach 8. Shamaris had the Chsiv Double Isaiah Shulchan. Even though you're right that normal woods plated in metal would become tummy, that since the Torah calls the table by its wood, the Torah is defining it as a wooden article, not a metal article. So let's see inside again. Top of Chalfon based on blind keli. It's a wooden keli which is made to be not moved. Not only that, it stops tumah. If you go to a cupboard and you put a dead body inside it, the tumah won't escape. Answers the Gemara, they would lift it up. They would say to them, see how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you. That they would remove it, the bread would be as fresh as the day they put it on. That the bread was as fresh the day they put it, than the day as the day they took it off. So the lechem aponim was something which everybody saw. On the day of when it came to Yom Tov, they would lift up the shulchan, they would take it out to the entrance of the Beis Hamikdash, and they would show it to everybody. Do you want to see it? so they would see the freshness of the bread. So it wasn't an inside nest which nobody knew about it. It was a nest that everybody knew about it. You always talk about the joke of a money tree. There was once a money tree. Shlomo Melech planted a tree made out of pure gold, and it would grow gold fruit and gold leaves. They would pluck them, sell them, and they would use them to pay for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. So it says, and it would take out fruit of gold, bismanon, ukshawach with Hashem by the wind would blow. Notion shenema yirash kalavono period. The Beis Hamikdash is often called the Vonoin because it would whiten the Beos of Klal. Ukshenichnesu, listen to this, Yeshua, when the Goyim Nachum Nehechal, when they came to Beis Hamikdash, Yovesh, the tree dried up. It doesn't work anymore. Shenema, Upoach, Levonoin, Umlol, the flowers of the Levonoin, Umlol got cut off. But also the HaKadosh Baruch Hu lachzir, Hashem is going to bring back this gold tree. Shenema, Poach Tifach, Betogel, Avkilas, Vevanim, Kvod, Halavonoin, Nitanoch. The glory of the Levonim will come back, and that is the tree which answers well. This is the kvi miracles that happens all the time. It's not counted. This is the kvi. A miracle which was perpetual, meaning that it didn't change. It wasn't like dramatic, so it didn't count. A nest where you could see it, so to speak, unfolding, that was a much greater nest, and that's why it was counted, but not a nest which didn't unfold. Just very, very briefly, what's the idea that a tree of gold grew in the Beis Hamikdash? What's the idea? The idea is like this: HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides life. The source of all life is only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wills it to be. And a person has to picture Hashem as a giver of life and as an essence of life, to the extent that even a dormant thing can have life if it is planted next to where Hashem is, so to speak. The person many times thinks himself like Shvochus Kibiyochel, as if it's the contrary. True life is only Hashem. We are Kibiyochel. Just very briefly, I got a lot of chizuk from it. They say like this: that when Uri Zohar became from, he used to be a comedian on the television. And what happened was they said to him, "Tell us one last joke. You know, you're becoming from, and you're no longer going to be a comedian. Tell us one last joke before you stop. It was his last time to be there." So he said, "Okay, I'll tell you one last joke. There was once a policeman who was undercover. And there was a Haredi on a motorbike. And he hated his fumas. So what did he do? He decided to go undercover behind him and catch him and give him a ticket. You know, he's bound not to indicate one time, to go a mile or two over the speed limit, not to give way. And he follows him for half an hour, and he doesn't do a single thing wrong. He was very frustrated. He pulls him over. I don't understand this. It's never happened to me before. There's a chance, I'm undercover. You didn't even know you had a policeman on your tail. And nobody does all the rules right, indicate every time. I would have caught you on the slightest infringement. I was planning to give you a ticket. And how can it be after half an hour? They said, "Oh, Hashem is with me. I can protect you. Hashem is with you. 2 people on a motorbike." And he gave him a ticket. So he said, they asked him, what you tried to get out of this joke. He said, you have to realize and appreciate Hashem as a reality. Hashem is with you. Hashem is in this room as much as any one of us is. In fact, Hashem's presence in this room is greater than any one of us is. And Hashem's presence was so great to Beis Hamikdash that you took a gold and you stuck it in the ground and it started growing. That was the essence of the golden tree. Omama, the smoke of the Ma'arocha, that what happened was, it did not spread. Wasn't the smoke? 5 special things about the fire of the Beis Hamikdash. Mevutza Kari, crouched like a lion. Ubora Kechama was as bright as the sun. Can you imagine such a thing? V'yeshbo Mamash, it had mamash is tangible, substance. It consumed moist things like dry things. If you put wet things into fire, it doesn't burn it so well, but this did. Yes, every common's water. No, they put the water inside his mouth. Every animal is full of water because every animal is moist. It had no smoke. And smoke with the head. There were 2 fires: the fire which came down from Shemaim, and the fire that every person was supposed to bring. The time the Christ was supposed to bring. The time also down the curd Eish al Mizbeach. After Bisheshu, this with Shemaim, mitzvah of the head that you always had to bring your own, and therefore besides the fire that came from Shemaim, you had to bring your own fire. So, and that was a special mitzvah. We learned it was actually part of the avodah was to set up a fire every day. It says more Rutzakavi. Well, Tanya Mukhadina, Skala Kelim, and even see it wasn't crouching like a lion, it was crouching like a dog. The Kash can make the Shusha can make the Sheni. Marshall discusses why did they look like a dog in the first place, Mikdash, like a lion, sorry, like brings like this, that who built the first place, Mikdash? Shlomo. Who was it descended from? Yehuda, Shevet Yehuda. Yehuda says, Go Arya Yehuda, Yehuda compared to a lion. Who built the second base of Mikdash was Koresh, who was Persian. In Daniel's visions, whenever he saw the Persians, they always looked like dogs. The reason is, a dog looked like it's walking ahead. The truth of the matter is, it has no independence. All it cares is about what people say, and it follows the owner. And the Persians, so to speak, all they wanted was covered. Since it was originally stated by since it was stated by Persians, therefore that's why it looked like a dog. Okay. Was there bichlal such a thing? If you look at the pasuk that Hashem describes how I'm going to be happy with the second Beis Hamikdash, it says ve'kovdo, I'll be honored through it. But the word ve'kovdo in the Chagai is missing a hey. There were 5 things in the second Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash, which did not happen in the second Beis Hamikdash. By the way, what was bigger, the first Beis Hamikdash or the second Beis Hamikdash? What was taller, bigger? Second. Which one lasted longer?
Second.
The second, 420 instead of 410. But nevertheless, there were 5 spiritual things that the second Beis Hamikdash did not have. What were they? Owen. There was no Owen the Kaperos, let's forget this one. There was no Owen. What happened to the Owen? By?
Women.
No, Yoshua Melech, who learned in Shkolim. Yoshua Melech hid it. What did he hide with it? The Shemna Mishra, and he hid the stick of Aaron, and the gold gift of the Plishtim. Yoshua Melech hid it. How many years before the Churban approximately did he hide it? 35. Okay.
How did he get it out?
He asked the Levim to do that. The Kruvim, there was no Kruvim. Eish, there was no fire. The Shechina, there was no Shechina. Ruach HaKodesh, there was no Ruach HaKodesh. There was no Nevuah, that means. For Oim V'tumim, there was no Oim V'tumim. So you see that at the end of the day, it says that there was no fire. And here we're saying that there was a fire. And the Lord says, Omri en have there was a fire. The Shiur, Le Messiah, it did not have that strength. That means it didn't have the ability to burn like it did in the first Beis Hamikdash, and therefore, of course they had a fire that was crouched like a dog, but it wasn't have that strength that it did in the first Beis Hamikdash. There's quite a lot to be showing on this 5 few words more. The problem is, Oim V'tumim is one of the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, and the Kohen Gadol that serves Beis Hamikdash without 8 clothes, what's the din? It's Chai Misa. So look at the second case, Oim V'tumim Hava. There was Oim V'tumim, but it didn't work. There was Oim V'tumim, it didn't work. Others, the Rambam and others say, the Ravid also said that it's not true. The Oim V'tumim was a parchment that went in the Choshen. It's not one of the 8 clothes. So Oim V'tumim were actually missing. The actual name of Hashem was missing. Another thing the Gemara says is there was no Ruach HaKodesh. So if you look at Rashi says, Ruach HaKodesh the second year of Daryovish and onwards, there was no Nevuah to the Nevi'im. This is very problematic. There's a pasuk in Zechariah that he got Nevuah in the 4th year of Daryovish, and there were other people like Malachi who got Nevuah later. So how can Rashi say from the 2nd year and onwards? So some say that it's a mistake of Rashi to change the Gilsa. Others say that it was a Rosh Hashanah certain times. But that is like this. There were definitely Nevi'im at the second Beis Hamikdash. There was some Nevi'im in the second Beis Hamikdash, beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash. Only what happened was they were only Nevi'im because they had already prophesied earlier. There was no new Nevuah in the second Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says there was no Ruach HaKodesh second Beis Hamikdash means they already got Nevuah from the second Beis Hamikdash. Okay. The Gemara's got Arichus. Maybe another time. There are 6 fires. Yesh Oicheles v'Neshosa, there's a fire that eats but doesn't drink. Yesh Shosa v'Necheles, there's a fire that drinks but doesn't eat. Yesh Oicheles v'Neshosa, there's a fire that eats and drinks. Yesh Oicheles lachin teivation that consumes moist like dry. Yesh Eish Doiche Eish, there's a fire that pushes away fire. Yesh Eish Oicheles Eish, there's a fire that consumes fire. And the more explains now each one of these six fires. Yesh Eish Oicheles v'Neshosa, a fire that can eat but not drink. Which fire is that? Oh, the dom, it's our fire. Because a normal fire, if you put water in it, goes out. If you put in solids, it burns that. That's our fire. Shoysa the cheles that drinks but doesn't eat. What's that? The cholin, people are not well. People are not well. They get very, very thirsty. They drink and drink and drink, but they lose their appetite. So the temperature they have is a fire which drinks but doesn't eat. Oicheles v'shoysa that eats and drinks stereo. He wanted to prove the greatness of Hashem, so he chose a test with the Nevi'eh Habar, and they each chose one cow. And Eliyahu Navi, after they didn't manage all day, he slaughtered his cow and he poured tremendous amount of water over the cow, and then the fire came down from Shemaim and consumed everything. So that ate and drank. Oicheles lachin kevation moist like dry to Ma'avocha. That's the fire of the Mizbeach. Yesh eish doich eish to Gavir. What happened was when Chanan and Azai were thrown in the fire, so Gavir came in with them. In fact, the pasuk there says that the Nebuchadnezzar looked into the fire and he said to his servants, "I don't understand. We threw 3 people in, and I see 4 inside. Who was the 4th? What?
How was he able to see?
He saw like gitmus, like a vision, and it was Gavir. And what happened was Gavir, what he did was he pushed the fire outwards. So the people that came near the fire were all burned to death. And it's all the servants that threw Chanan and Azai into the fire were burned to death. The Chanan and Azai that were inside, they were cold, they were cool, they were fine. So Gavir was a fire pushed to fire. The Yesh, Eish, or Cheles Eish is a fire that consumes fire, the Shechina. So Amama, Akshruch wasn't sure whether he would create the world. So he asked different groups of Malachim, what should he do? And one group of Malachim said, what? You should create human beings. They're useless. What did Hashem do? He put his finger inside and he burned them. So the fire of Hashem can burn Malachim. It's a very deep Gemara, but some of the other splits it into 3 different categories, Ruach, Nefesh, and Neshama, but nothing which I could grasp or translate to changing our lives. To make it something that we can learn from. You said that one of the miracles was that the smoke of the Ma'arocha didn't scatter. Last Motzei Shmini Atzeres. What happened was on Sukkot, what does Hashem judge? Water. So Motzei Yom Tov, they would look at the fire and they would look at the pillar of smoke. And with that, they would judge what kind of winter they're going to have. And what did they say? They would all look at the smoke of the Ma'arocha. No to clap it often. If it was bending towards the north, which wind was blowing? Does anybody know? Southern wind. Somebody came to my house. They said, "Well, good question. Stuck in this Gemara. You'll see next tomorrow." What's it? He didn't have this point. It was all stuck. It's not. It's a southern wind because the more later going to say the southern. If the cloud is going to the north, which wind is it? A southern wind. So again, when the pillar of cloud went to the north, which means that it was a southern wind, and Nim Smech Balabatim, it means that what's going to happen is that there was going to be all their fruit will go moldy. Since the fruit will go moldy, the people who hold the fruit have got nothing to do with them. So what will they do then? Sell them cheap. So the poor people will get the fruit that's cheap. The people who are wealthy will be very sad because they couldn't hold their wealth. If they should there'll be much rain, and the fruit will go moldy. Not to clap the door, meaning a northern wind. And I'd save him. The poor people would be sad because there'd be a shortage of rain, or by that because they knew they'd make a handsome profit. Because people would be desperate for food. They should get there'd be the fruit would keep. Not to clap in Mizrach, a western wind that goes smechin. Clap in Mava, call that saving. But nice, we see one thing that the cloud did change. How can you say that all the winds did not move it, affected? It did. The winds did affect it. Answers the more. The Ozavasi went like a pillar, but it would move to one direction or whichever direction it was. But it didn't scatter, it didn't spread. It was a covered fire, the smoke would go up like a pillar. But it's true, the pillar itself could tilt in different directions, but not like a normal fire. When you have a wind, that goes in all directions. That the east, everybody was happy, the west, everybody was sad. This is what his question was. That east is good. So he asked, what's the contradiction? You just said east, everybody's happy. And now the world carries on. It's very, very good. What's the answer? The first time he's talking about the pillar of smoke. When the pillar of smoke went to the east, meaning it's a western wind, so that's good. And then the Beis asks a kasha, La'olam Yofa, Mizochis La'olam Yofa is always good, is the eastern wind. Ma'avov is La'olam Kosher. Ruach Tzafon is Yofa Lechitin is good for the wheat, B'shor Sheviu Shlish if it's ready going a third. But Kosher Lezeis if it's bad for the olives, Ranshin Chuntin as they're ripening. Ruach Dvoim is Kosher Lechitin is bad for wheat. B'shor Sheviu Shlish when they're going a third. V'Yofa Lezeis is Ranshin Chuntin, but they're good for the olives when they are ripening. How to remember this? The Shulchan was in the north, the Menorah was in the south. So therefore, it's easy to remember. So whichever wind would come from whichever direction would increase whichever direction that was meant to be. So if it went to the north where the Shulchan is, it was very good for the wheat. If it went to the south, it was very good for the olives. But either way, the contradiction is that before you said that east, which means west, is good, and now you're saying that west is no good. So the Lord says, "Lokash holon malahu." In Eretz Yisrael, where there was a very shortage of rain, so therefore when there was a western wind, everybody was happy because you needed a lot of rain. But in Bavel, which was a very moist land, so you did not want so much rain, and therefore it was no good. So it depends where you lived, whether it was it's a big pay, we should always say to learn again and again, to get an understanding of how to prepare ourselves for Yom Kippur, and just get clarity in this world and next world. And Mazel Tov. It's like a very long period. It's who Sean, you want whiskey?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, however you start with a chaim.
Wow. Don't do things half-assed.
Yeah, pass it back, chaim.
How many cups do you think?
Okay, go on.
Mazel